I want to have a loving, caring, meaningful relationship. I
Mm.
want that in my life. I can't keep showing up as the same person. I've got to do something different. And I think that's one of the things we try and avoid, hitting those dark moments and those really lousy times in our life, or those really challenging times. But sometimes they're the best things ever for us, because that's what wakes us up to make the change that we know we need to make, but we've been too afraid to, or we're just too comfortable. It's a phrase I've heard long time ago, and we're too comfortable in our misery. It's not
Yes.
terrible. I mean, it's not great, but it's not terrible. So I'm just gonna stay right here in this little spot that's like, eh.
Today's guest is James Dunn. He was adopted, raised in a household with an alcoholic father, and arrested for attempted armed robbery at the age of 17. Even though he discovered personal development in his late 20s, giving him what seemed like a more positive direction, it would be nearly another 15 years before his second divorce sent him on a quest to find out just why he continued to struggle in life and how he could change it once and for all. A mindset and performance coach, James Dunn helps you unlock the mysteries of your struggles, overcome them, and create a life that you absolutely love. Welcome, James.
Hey, Anita, how are you today?
Great, thank you. And thank you for being here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yes, looking forward to it.
So, what is one of the most courageous things you have done after I've just read out your short bio?
Oh my goodness. One of the most courageous things I've ever done. So many things. I think, if you want to look at like the crazy over the top, I've walked on fire, I've gone skydiving,
Yes.
those type of bold things, that we think of like over the top, many things like that. But I think more than anything, it's just having the bravery to wake up every single day and chase my dreams and go for my
Mm.
goals, and not get caught up in the mentality of, I have to follow what society says. Here's the path that you're supposed to follow. Because I mean, I did, follow that path for way too long. Went to college for a little while. I realized very quickly it wasn't for me, but got the 9 to 5 job, and kind of followed that path. But then eventually, after going through all my challenges and my struggles, realizing like, I did what everybody said I was supposed to do, and I'm not happy. Why am I not happy? And it was kind of following what everybody told me I was supposed to do. And so I think the most courageous thing I've done is been able to step back and say, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do. This is my
Mhm.
life, and I want to go down my path. And if at the end of the day I'm not happy, I'm not successful, I'm not whatever, well, at least I know I went down the path that I wanted to go down, and not followed somebody else's version of it, and got to the end of my life and regretted it, wondering, well, what if I had just gone my own direction?
And absolutely, you've got to try out things that, without following the herd, without following everyone that's doing whatever, like the famous book is Path Least Resistant. But, you've got to do what's right for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think we get so caught up, especially like in our family or in our little bubble. And that was a big piece that helped me, was getting outside of my little bubble that I'd grown up in. It wasn't until my
Mm.
mid 20s that I moved outside of the town that I grew up in. And that allowed me to see the world from a little bit different perspective. I could like, oh, wait a minute. I don't have to follow exactly what everybody around me is doing, and what everybody else says I'm supposed to do. And it wasn't that huge of a difference in terms of where I moved to, but at least it was different people, different
Mhm,
perspectives, and different
mhm.
ideas. And you also, as you step into a new environment, then you get to almost take on a new identity. They don't know you, they haven't known you your entire life. And so they don't have this preconceived notion of who you are and what to expect from you. So you can almost change, like, well, wait a minute, I was this person here, and not that you're going to change completely, but I can bring on a new persona, a new personality, and be more of myself, because I don't have to worry about, oh, well, they remember me from fifth grade, or they remember
Yeah.
me when I was in kindergarten, and something like that, some embarrassing moment from back then. They don't judge me based on that. I'm this new guy who has a fresh opportunity.
And I think it's so important. And absolutely what you're saying, people actually see us as we perhaps have been towards them. or
Mhm.
whatever's happened. Like they say, the people we hang around with know us, but do they actually know us? They
Mm.
have a perceived conception of us,
Yeah.
and that's all to do with the mind, but we can speak about that in a moment. You were adopted and raised in a household with an alcoholic father. Being adopted in itself would have raised some concerns, but having a father that's an alcoholic, how did you manage to navigate all that? And it must have been you must have been quite young as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was adopted when I was 6 months old. So I,
Hmm.
didn't know it when it
Okay.
happened,
Hmm.
but somewhere, I don't remember the exact age when my dad told me. But it was somewhere, I think around 6, 7 years old. My adoptive father, I just call him dad because I've
Hmm.
never had any interest in researching to find out who my biological parents were. I figured they had their reasons, they had, whatever. So my dad, he told me when I was around 6 or 7 years old, and I remember it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, whoa, what do you mean? You're not my dad. And he didn't say it like that, but it's just how it kind of hit me. And I don't think it ever really, it's not like I felt like it created this major rift between he and I
Hmm.
just because of that, or that I looked at my parents any differently. The only time it would ever really, I felt, come up even was I'm 6 foot tall. My dad and my mom both are or were. My dad passed away 25 years ago, but my dad, he was only like maybe like 5'2". My mom's like,
Okay.
5 foot tall. So if we were ever, and I got to be 6 foot tall pretty quick, and so if we're ever out somewhere and somebody's like, how the heck are you so tall and your dad's so short or whatever? So like subconsciously, I'm like, well, it's because he's not my biological father.
Mm.
That's the only time it ever really came up. Or if something weren't really going the way I wanted to in life, every now
Mhm.
and then that little thought would creep up like, well, I wonder if my biological parents, if
Mhm.
you know, if this would have happened if I was with them or whatever. So it was one of those where it didn't really affect me on an outward level. I didn't really feel like, I thought, overall we had a pretty good life. We had a middle class, income, so it was one of those
Mhm.
things where it wasn't like I ever really truly wanted for anything. Didn't always get everything that I ever wanted, but I wasn't starving. I had a nice roof over my head. All the basics were completely covered. But it was one of those where I think it just laid this little foundation of not ever being sure, like who can I trust, and questioning myself again when those challenges would come up. I would start questioning myself. Well, what if this, had happened differently in life, and what if my biological father wasn't an alcoholic? Where my adoptive father is, and it just created this foundation of insecurity
Mm.
and not being confident, I think, is really what it did for me.
I can imagine, yeah, a lot of ifs and buts, but at the
Yeah.
same time, curiosity. And like you said, you didn't go ahead and find out, and that's really great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comfortable
It's
as
just
you
one of those
are.
where, like I say, I look at it, and it's interesting too, because having gone through all the challenges and getting to a place in my
Mhm.
life where I did went down my own personal development journey, I can look back now. Whereas at one point, like in those darkest moments, I would think, well, my biological parents didn't want me. They gave me up and, kicked me to the curb basically. But I've been able to reframe that now and look at it. I was actually doubly blessed. I was loved twice because my
Mhm.
biological parents had whatever was going on in their life. They knew that they were not going to be able to give me the life that they wanted to give their child. So they put me up for
Mhm.
adoption. They easily
Absolutely.
could have aborted me. I could
Mhm.
literally not be here right now, but they chose to go through, at least the mother chose to go through that whole pregnancy, give me up to somebody else. And then I had a family choose to bring me into their home.
Mhm.
So I was doubly loved. Whereas some people get stuck with the parents that they were born with, and they only get loved once. So hey, it's all good for me.
Absolutely. I love it. Absolutely love it. Love your reframe on that. Uh, so tell me about the time you were arrested for attempted armed robbery at the age of 17. What was going on at that stage of your life?
Oh, that little thing, that was nothing. No, it was one of those where, again, coming up in that doubt, insecurity, not really feeling like I belonged. Um, and it wasn't even so much with the parents, it was just in the environment that I was growing up in. It was a very blue collar town, and nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, it's very hardworking, very honorable people. I love that. But just seeing the vision of what a lot of the people in my area were doing, again, it was really, really hard manual labor. And I was always growing up like as the computer nerd kid. That I got into computers from a very, very young age.
Uh-huh.
And so I wasn't seeing a path down the life that I felt like I wanted to live. I didn't see anybody around me that was living that. And so what ended up happening was just being disenfranchised, not really feeling like I fit in. I had a couple of friends that kind of felt the same way. And so we all started drinking. I started drinking when I was 14
Mhm.
years old. Watching my dad being an alcoholic, it was very easy for me
Mhm.
to slide right into that lifestyle myself. So we're drinking from a very young age, and then we start, vandalizing things, knocking signs, street signs over, things like that. And then
Mhm.
this slowly starts building. You start shoplifting, and
Mhm.
then you're getting a rush from that. And then so you start breaking into houses, and you get a rush from that, and you're not getting caught. And it just builds and builds and builds. And it got to a point where ultimately, yeah, me and my friends, we had this little group of us where we were robbing people, situations, going into houses and literally holding people at gunpoint. And it's one of those things I can look back now and like, holy crap, that's insane.
Mhm.
But you don't realize it is like that, where it's just this tiny little step, one after another, after another, after another, where it builds up, and it almost makes perfect sense because you're not getting caught, nobody's stopping you, and you just want that bigger rush. And that's what it led to. And thankfully, none of us ever got killed. Nobody ever got seriously hurt. One of my buddies ended up getting shot
Oh
because one
gosh.
of the robberies that we committed, I wasn't there for that one, but it turned into a gun battle, and he got shot. Again, thankfully he
Mhm.
didn't, get seriously injured, and
Mhm.
nobody got
Mhm.
injured from the other side of it. But yeah, just one of those things where we have to be so careful about the people we're surrounding ourselves with and the
Yes.
environment that we're living in, and paying attention to the path that we're on, because you can so easily go from something so simple as we're just going to drink and party, and then, oh, we're going to knock
Mhm.
over a street sign, or we're going to take somebody's snowman, Christmas decoration out of the yard. Next thing you know, you're pointing a gun
Yeah,
at somebody. It's very, very easy to
absolutely.
happen if you get caught up. I always hate to say the wrong crowd, but if it's a group of people who are in that same mindset, and it's not the path that you truly want to be on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Easily done, like you say, one step at a time, and you don't even realize the increments, and it leads on to such a bigger point. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. A complete different path about the mindset. So that leads nicely into my next question. Tell me more about your journey onto a mindset and performance coach. Is that something then came about because of your experiences?
It was one of those things where it wasn't even directly from that. It was a
Mm-hmm.
situation. I went through that whole thing. Got arrested when I was 17 years old, as I said, and thankfully at the time, in the States, if you're arrested at 17 years old, they can try you as an adult or as a juvenile, being a felony for which it was. They could go either direction with it.
Mm,
And thankfully, I had enough people in my community that knew I was a good kid, had just gone down, made some bad choices, but they knew deep down I was a good kid. So they tried me as a juvenile, and I went on my juvenile record. And then so I was still able to not have that ding on my record, I guess. And moving forward a few years, I got a job that put me into a management position. And
mm,
what they did was they introduced me to, Stephen Covey and SMART goals and all these things that started showing me like, hey, wait a minute, here's a little glimmer of this idea of a life that I had thought about, that I wanted to have. And so I got really heavily into personal development and learning
mhm,
and, studying all of this and changing your mindset, and thought I had it all figured out. And what happened was, you fast forward 14 years, I found myself getting my second divorce, having to raise my second child in a split home. The one thing I swore I would never do after my first divorce had happened. I had to look at the situation and say, well, hey, there's two divorces, one common denominator, that's me. So I'm the one that has to change. I have to
mhm.
figure out what's going on. And what I did from that point was I went to my very first live Tony Robbins event. I'd known about him, I'd been
Wow.
reading his books for years at that point, but it was one of those things where I had just been reading the words, and I could regurgitate the words and talk about them and tell everybody how to live their amazing, incredible life, but I wasn't actually implementing them. I wasn't actually doing any of the work.
Mhm,
And that's where going to that event and seeing people in real life and communicating with them and talking to them and hearing their stories of their challenges and struggles they had gone through and how they had gotten past them and not allowed that to hold them back. That's what really opened it up for me, because before, what I had done was I was reading the books but I was separating myself from the outcomes. I was saying, well,
Mhm.
that's great for Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins can go off and do this stuff, or whoever this other author was, like Stephen Covey,
Mhm.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He can go off and do these things, but not James Dunn, not Jimmy Dunn from Benton, Illinois, who has all these challenges and these struggles in this past. He can't do it. But when you put yourself really to kind of almost bring it back full circle to what we just talked about with the quote unquote wrong crowd, once I got into a room
Mm.
with people who were striving to do the things I wanted to do and hear how they didn't allow their past to hold them back, I'm like, oh, okay, I can actually do these things. I don't have to make excuses for myself or hold myself back anymore. Let's create the life that we want to live. And it was kind of an evolution from that. It was going through that experience, sharing that with some people locally over the course of a couple of years in a local
Mhm.
meetup group that I did, and just seeing the impact it was having on them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I could actually become a coach. I could actually really have an impact on
Mhm.
the world, not just share it with one or two, three people here locally that I'm meeting up with for lunch or whatever, or these little groups. I could turn this into something where I can have a major impact on the world. And that's how it all naturally unfolded.
And yeah, that's beautiful because the thing is, like you said, you actually have to do the work.
Wait, what? You gotta do the
Yeah,
work?
yeah,
Oh,
you got to do the work.
why don't they put that in the books? Darn it.
one thing is reading, and like, yeah, you're at the seminars, you're going to all the events. There's some people that go to all the events, read all the books, and
Yeah,
then still wonder why. You
yeah,
actually have to do the work, but
yeah.
it's a process for everyone. And that's the thing. So, what was it about your second divorce that made you look at your life?
It was just one of those things where I feel like I've got a pretty good awareness, of some of the things. And I say that, and then of course I think about times when the awareness completely wasn't there. But at certain points in my life, and I think what it really happened to be was just I had gotten to a point in my life with that second as the second divorce
Hmm.
began to happen, I had started to really do a little bit of the work. I'd gotten into running at that point, which was something that I had never ever thought I would do, but had run my first marathon. So I was
Wow.
really taking control of my health. Not that I was ever in bad health, but just really wanting to try and improve myself and starting to do some of the work. And running that marathon was a huge, huge help because you can't not do the work. You have to go out and run every single day, or at least, based on your schedule, you have to go do the work. And I think
Mhm.
that really kind of pushed, a few of the buttons where I could start piecing it together, like, hey, if you do the steps, if you do the work, you will get the outcome you want. So it was going through that. And then when the divorce happened, saying, okay, I've gotten the result I want from the marathon by doing the work. Now that the divorce is here and I see that my life isn't going the direction I want it to go, and having that realization that I was the one that still had to do something. I couldn't keep reading books, listening to tapes, doing
Mhm.
whatever. I've got to physically do something different. So that's what it really was just understanding you've got to get out there. You've got to do something, and not wanting to go into another relationship and having that same cycle happen again. Really looking at this like, I want to have a loving, caring, meaningful relationship. I
Mm.
want that in my life.
Absolutely.
I can't keep showing up as the same person. I've got to do something different. And I think that's one of the things we try and avoid, hitting those dark moments and those really lousy times in our life, or those really challenging times. But sometimes they're the
Mhm.
best things ever for us, because that's what wakes us up to make the change that we know we need to make, but we've been too afraid to, or we're just too comfortable. It's a phrase I've heard long, long, long time ago, and we're too comfortable in our misery. It's not
Yes.
terrible. I mean, it's not great, but it's not terrible. So I'm just gonna stay right here in this little spot that's like, and that sucks.
And it's the comfort zone.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I keep telling people there's no comfort in the comfort zone.
No, no. It's there's moments where it's nice, but you're not truly living an amazing, incredible life that you can live. And I mean,
Mm.
if you want to live in your comfort zone, more power to you. It's your life. Choose to do that. But if you're like me, or if you're like you, Anita, I know we want to have an incredible life, one that
Mhm.
we look back on and say, man, yeah, that was awesome. I can die peacefully knowing that I lived the life that I wanted to live and I accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. And that's not necessarily, people get caught up in this idea that I made $10 billion, or I had this ginormous home or whatever. It's not that. It can literally just be being the best housewife, the best husband, the best father, the best mother, the best, just whatever,
Mhm.
whatever that vision is for you, choosing that life and creating that life and living that life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, how can one understand and navigate life changing experiences? Because you've had a few in your time. As you've just explained, you went into self development. But anybody that's listening, how can you give them some tips, recommendations? How can one understand and navigate life experiences?
Well, understand that they don't define you.
Hmm.
This was something in the Tony Robbins world I learned that really made a big difference for me, is like nothing in life has any meaning except for the meaning that we choose to give it. So
Absolutely.
if we go back to where we started very early on with my adoption, I gave it a meaning when I was really, really young. But as I got older and I got into personal development and was able to look at it from a different perspective, I gave it a brand new meaning. I gave it a meaning that
Mhm.
empowered me instead of disempowered me. And so no matter what you go through, it's a situation like you look at anything. If you have two people that go through the same circumstance, same event, they're going to see it two completely different ways based on their experience and based on how they choose to perceive it. Some people are going to look at it and it's like, oh, that was the worst thing ever that happened to me. Other people will look at it as, hey, that's the best thing that ever happened to me because
Mhm.
it made me make that change, or it gave me this new way to look at things. So whatever it is that you are going through or that you've gone through, if it's bringing you down, if it's not giving you the fuel that you need to create the life that you want, just take a few minutes, step back and say, okay, how can I look at this differently? What is the beautiful lesson I can learn from this? Because my dad being an alcoholic, I learned patience. I learned to be able to listen to people much, much more deeply than I ever would otherwise, because I had to with him.
Mhm.
I was the buffer between him and my family and some of the chaos that he would bring. And so I would literally have to sit there and listen to him for hours, just kind of calm him and try and read his emotions. And how can I, for lack of a better term, manipulate him to basically pass out? It's what it boiled down to.
Unfortunately,
And
yes.
but it gave me this ability to learn to listen to people and have so much more patience and not just blow up when things got chaotic. Because he would scream, he would yell, we would get into physical altercations, and I had to be the one to bring that back down instead of feed into that energy. Because if I fed into it, it would just make it
Yeah.
even worse than it already was. So if I look at my two divorces, if I look at my very first divorce, yeah, that sucked. Yeah, I had to raise my son in a split home.
Mhm.
But when my daughter came along, I'm now a much better father. I get so many compliments, not, humble brag, pat myself on the back. I get so many compliments about me, how I am with my daughter and the things that I do for her and that I do with her. Trust me, I wasn't the greatest dad for my son, but the reason I'm so great with my daughter is because I had that opportunity to have some time between those two children and say,
Mhm.
what could I do differently? How can I go
Mhm.
into this one and be better? Especially once her mother and I divorced. I said, okay, here I go again, split home. How can I do this differently? So, whatever you're going through, how can you take that and say, what is the beauty that can come out of this? What is something great that can come out of this that I can learn, that I can grow from? I just saw a meme yesterday and it was so cool because it was time wasted and it was like showing it on a clock like 15 minutes, and it was saying, and then it showed like time wasted plus regret, and it was like 30 minutes. So, like, the only thing regret does is just waste more time. So let
Mm.
that regret go. Whatever it was, just accept it, move on, say, how can I learn from it? It's there to make you a better person.
Absolutely, because absolutely live by that. What's the learning? Discard everything else.
Yeah.
Just take the learnings and move on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
1000%.
Yes. And I think that's really courageous of you as well to actually, okay, realize this is me, I'm the common denominator here, like you said. And then you were saying that, okay, I wasn't a great father to my son, and you want to be a great father regardless. So it's as if you got a second chance around with your daughter. Let's do this.
Yeah. And that's how you can even look at if it's a divorce, if it's a loss of a
Mm,
job,
mm,
whatever the situation you're
mm,
going through. Once you've had that quote unquote negative experience, say, okay, that happened, but how can I go into the next one and be better at it because of what I've
mm,
learned? Because even if
mhm,
it's the divorce, you look at, for myself, I'm talking about relationships. Okay, I went through these two divorces. What were the common denominators in those
mm,
divorces besides me? What were the characteristics of the people that I was getting involved with? It helped me to learn what I don't want in relationships. It
mm.
helped me learn to set boundaries earlier on in the relationships. It helped me to learn to communicate, even when it's very uncomfortable, because that's the one thing we love to shy away from those very uncomfortable conversations. I like to joke that, we were looking for the red flags in, the relationships early on. I saw the red flags, but I pretended they were pink. I pretended they were all these other colors, shades of red, but they were there. But if I had just allowed myself to realize, okay, these are red flags and had conversations, either A, we could have addressed the problems, that
Mhm.
were in the relationship earlier on and resolve them, or realize, hey, this is not going to work out for us, and ended that relationship much earlier, and not gone through that whole process. I'm still thankful for those marriages because I got two beautiful and amazing
Mm.
children out of those. So, but again, just really taking the judgment away from ourselves in what we've done, the decisions we've
Mm.
made.
Mm.
I always like to say you did the best you could at the time. You did the best with the
Absolutely.
knowledge that you had. You would never, nobody sits here and says, "Man, I'm rolling up my life today." Nobody that I know does that. We just go based on the evidence that we have or the information that we have in this moment. This is literally what I believe is the best decision for me.
Mm.
And in hindsight, it's not always it doesn't turn out the way we thought it was going to or the way we wanted it to necessarily, but it was the best decision for us in that moment. So give ourselves a grace, accept that, hey, we did the best that we could. And like we keep talking about, just learn from it, grow from it. That's the beauty. And that's what life's really all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And you've given us so many great resources. James, what would you say is the biggest takeaway to anyone that wants to start unlocking the mystery of their struggles, overcome them, and create a life that they absolutely love?
I think it would just be a lot of, a lot of touch points that we've talked about already,
Mm.
is giving yourself the grace to not judge yourself, not beat yourself up over where you've been in life. Have the courage to step into, the vision of yourself of who you truly want to be, because
Mm.
that person is there. It's available to you. Not allowing what anybody else is trying to tell you who you are or what you should be or any of that. Don't allow that noise to creep into
Mhm.
your head. Trust yourself, trust your gut. You know who you are, you know what you're capable of. And yeah, there's this little voice, I'm sure, in the back of your head that says, "Oh, you're not worthy of this, you don't deserve this. Who do you think you are to
Mhm.
try and do this or do that or whatever?" And all of that's just fear, and there's the goofy little saying, fear is just false evidence appearing real. And it's us allowing ourselves not to trust who we are and what we're capable of. It's allowing, it's us looking at those little goofs that we've had in life and creating those meanings that we've already talked about that
Mhm.
really, aren't empowering us. And we've got the choice. I mean, at the end of the day, you literally can look at anything and create whatever meaning you want for it.
Mhm.
So why not create an empowering meaning? Why not trust yourself? Why not believe in yourself? Because I mean, at the end of my life, I would much rather know that I gave myself every single opportunity I possibly had
Mhm.
to live the life that I wanted to live, versus just saying, you know what, I'm gonna toss my hands up, screw it. Yep, you're all right. I'm a piece of crap. Life sucks. Let's just die. That doesn't sound like fun to me. And I hope it doesn't sound like the life that you guys want to live if you're listening to this podcast. So give yourself every opportunity. Trust yourself, believe in yourself, and just step aside. Let me go live my life. You go live yours. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to enjoy life. That's what I'm going to do.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So where can the listeners find you online? What's your website, James?
Yeah, so therealjamesdunn.com is my website. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm a little lately, I've been shifting a little bit back more towards Facebook,
Mhm.
just because the stinking algorithm on Instagram drives me insane. But anyway, I'm on all the social media platforms pretty much at the real James Dunn. That's where you can find me. Love to connect with people. Love to just do anything I can to help. Again, people live the most amazing, incredible life that you can possibly live, because that's what else are we here for other than just
Mhm.
celebrate and enjoy life?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you for sharing your courageous journey with us today. And by doing so, I know you have helped so many others. James Dunn.
Thank you, thank you.
James, my final question to you is, because we are all about create the courage to be fearless, what is your definition of courage?
Oh my goodness, my definition of courage is. You know, I talked about at the very beginning, doing things like skydiving and
Mhm.
walking on fire and all of these. And I don't necessarily think that's courage. I think that is on a certain
Mhm.
level. It's cool. It's great. It's awesome. It's
Mhm.
great stories and awesome pictures and videos you can show people and like, oh, look what cool stuff I did. But courage is just being yourself and not allowing anyone else to dictate who you're going to be. It is leaning into that true, most authentic version of yourself, regardless of what other people are going to say, regardless of what other people might think. That to me is true courage, just the willingness to show up as you.